Thanks for listening to Leadership Level Up. I'm Brian Prairie.
And I'm Dr. Jeff Williamson.
I am just starting my leadership journey.
And I've been guiding leaders for 30 years.
Our podcast aims to shine a spotlight on outstanding leaders and provide a platform for them to describe their leadership journey and share the guiding principles that have helped them become great leaders.
Welcome to Leadership Level Up podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Williamson. And it's always fun when we can have a friend come back for another episode of our podcast. And today, that's the case with Dr. Scott Goselin, who was with us a while back. In case you didn't catch that episode yet, I won't shame you, but I'll share a little bit about his background and what he has done over the years. He is in his 19th year as Superintendent of Bradley School District 61 here in Illinois. He has been an administrator in the Bradley School District for 28 years. And prior to that was a teacher in the Reed-Custer School District here in Illinois. He's a graduate of Bradley Bourbonnais High School, Olivet Nazarene University, Governor State, Lewis University, and received his doctorate from National Lewis University in 2008. I know besides your work that you invested much in your family and your two daughters and your wife. Right. And it's been fun being friends and watching them come on. I remember when we first met, they were little girls, and this is 12, 13 years ago. They were itty bitties. And so being a daughter dad myself, it's fun sometimes just friend to friend to talk about raising our families and the things that we want for them, we hope for them.
Right, absolutely.
And I know you were sharing about their involvement in dance. One of my daughters with many years taking ballet and dance and being in the Nutcracker and being in different seasonal shows. So I kind of miss that, to be honest with you. Maybe you can cue me when their next show is, and I can slide in and reflect back on the days.
And really what's nice about it is that Sue and myself are both in that particular Nutcracker as the governors. So we're actually dancing. So we actually
So it's like a
dance.
family thing.
It is a family thing, absolutely.
Oh my gosh, I really need to think about coming now.
Yeah, absolutely.
You didn't tell me that before.
Yeah. Looking forward to it. And having kids, and I think we all can relate to it, is simply you're going to have some great times and you're going to have some tough times. You're going to have some difficult conversations. You're going to have some difficult, their personalities as strong as my wife and I. And we go through a lot of things, and that's how we learn. That's how we learn as a family. That's how we learn together. But we all know that we're all going to be together, and knowing that we're here for each other. Yeah. And I think that's the most important thing.
And that's one of the wonderful things now with our kids now being in their 20s and our son Jordan, 31, is that with those ups and downs of the years where we're raising them and their burgeoning independence, we want them to be independent to a point, and then we want them to be a little more and a little more, but we don't ever want them to be disconnected from us. And
absolutely.
I think we both have made those efforts to try to stay plugged in, even when our kids might have a different opinion on something, but to say, I have your back, and I love you more than anybody in the world will ever love you as a father. And I think that gives some security. And I think that shows up in how you have been a teacher. I think that shows up in how you've been an educator over the years.
Yeah, I totally agree, because there's a lot of things that actually go on that we've seen before, and know the behaviors and knowing and how to deal with the situation that maybe some parents that are not in education have not dealt with that experience or not.
Yeah.
But it's and I'm very fortunate. Like I said, my wife's a principal, and we have a lot of good conversations. Just dealing with adolescents and dealing with young adults.
You got a building full of them. She has a building full of them every day.
Exactly. And we're to the point of one's driving, one's have a permit, just like we all do that transition, and just going through the anxiety of either being in a car or not in a car, knowing that they're driving on themselves,
Yeah, it's that mixed feeling of we take a deep breath every time they get in the car and leave, not because we think they're crazy, careless kids, it's just because we love them so deeply. We want them to be okay.
No, I totally
And that's
agree.
a tough tension sometimes when kids are growing up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I know besides being dads, you've seen a lot of shifts and changes and things that you've had to respond to as a leader within the context of secondary education. And so I wanted to hear your take on some of the ways that the challenges are different, some of the joys and blessings that are different, some of the things that maybe you've seen as a shift that probably sometimes has made it harder to be a school leader, harder to be a principal or a superintendent. What are some of those shifts and changes you've seen over your years in education?
Mostly the last couple years, and let me say that obviously I work in a great school district. We have great administration, but we have a great teaching staff that are on the line. They're in the hunt every day with kids. I mean, they're in the classrooms. They're teaching and taking care of kids, and I give a lot of credit to them. I try to get as much classrooms as I can, along with the principals. They do, but our teaching staff, and things have changed, especially in the last few years. I mean, COVID did not help any of us in our school district and everyone else, and we're finding out more and more. And I'm not saying anything new, but our Kankakee County and Iroquois, the mental health is struggling for our kids. And our staff and our parents, it's a tough task, and we're seeing more behaviors that we've never seen before because of it. Now, whether it's whatever, if it's staying at home or whatever, things have happened out there, but it's affected our kids and it's affecting our learning as well. So we're not just educating kids; we're taking care of the mental health of our kids every day when they walk into that building. And you can go to any of our buildings and you see that on a consistent basis, which I'm sure happened before, but you're seeing it more and more now. And knowing people that had either kids or even adults that have had some mental health issues, concerns, trying to get them service, at least have conversations. That's a tough task as well.
It is.
I think in the education world, I would love to continue on with it if it happens. But it's more difficult task nowadays than it has been before.
Yeah, and I think this is probably true for all of us, that there were perhaps challenges, struggles, and difficulties that students, teachers, parents, and all of us faced before 2020. But it seemed like the intensity and the impact of that accelerated so quickly.
Absolutely.
To where, yes, maybe there were some struggles for any of us, but it was just most like it was compressed and heightened in ways that were tough for everybody. So certainly these last 3 years of the whole mix of remote and in person and do we, don't we, and all those kinds of things that were touchy subjects, and I suppose still are in a lot of quarters, but that was a stretch here. So we can kind of break things at prior to 2020 when we hadn't yet hit a pandemic and all the struggles and challenges. What were some things that you saw then as, hey, I think that's getting better, or I think we're struggling in this area that might be pre-pandemic?
We always, obviously, our teaching staff focusing on reading, writing, and on all those academic areas. And it's just, I'm not a firm believer of one test makes or breaks a person. And unfortunately, I think through our state and the tests that we have one time a year, puts a significant toll on our kids, our school, and a lot of our education, saying that, hey, sometimes we're not doing that well, or we are. I don't know that. But no matter what that test says, our kids are learning. Our kids are learning, not just in Bradley, in Bourbonnais. They're learning all over the place. And I think that no matter what you do, we have to keep that in mind, that it's a continuous progression of going from one semester and then you go into another grade and stuff. And I think we need to get back and accept those praises.
Kind of a balance.
Try and get those balance and stuff. And, and I'm a firm believer that our fine arts department, being a student just going through school, but to help with their well-being, to get involved with things, and
active
learning. Exactly. If you have chorus, you have band, You know, in our school district, our band and chorus programs are outstanding, and that helps their learning process. That helps the kid get to school.
Right.
And I think the biggest thing that back then compared now is simply we want kids to get school, to learn, to be safe, and be productive citizens.
Sure.
And I think that's huge. So, you know, going back to whatever, if you started when I started back then, you know, we've seen continuous improvement just in our kids. But I think that what frustrates me to the most is simply, you know, one test does not dictate if our kids are learning or not.
Yeah.
And I think that's a strong point. And I don't believe, I think a lot of people believe the same thing.
Yeah. I remember several years ago, probably this maybe 15 years back, I had a chance to hear a speaker at a conference who was the CEO of ServiceMaster, which is a huge national company. And he said something that just has stuck with me so many years. And that was this saying, not everything we count matters. And not everything that matters can be counted.
That's true. Absolutely.
And this was from someone running a national business. Their job is to be profitable, to be efficient, to take care of their customers and all those kinds of things. But I was so impressed that he highlighted that yes, we should measure our work. Yes, we should have high standards of excellence. But there are things that matter greatly that don't show up in a spreadsheet.
Exactly.
And that, I think
that's true.
You know, so I spent like 8-9 years as a full-time faculty member in higher ed. I mean, I know there are things that I know in my heart about what took place in that classroom and the growth and the change and the shift that I saw in those people in those programs that maybe didn't show up in, did you get an A or a B plus? Right. But to see the lights come on and to see passion for a certain subject, like you mentioned, the fine arts, you know, there are oftentimes that the fine arts are cathartic and healing for someone who's been through trauma or is going through a hard time, to be able to plug in and to create something unique with their own.
Our kids, not just this year, our kids, referring to kids just in general, they have so many things going on in their lives.
Right.
It's not that, you know, hopefully they'll get up and having breakfast. Hopefully they have a clean pair of clothes to put on. Hopefully they know how to get to the school. And then once they get to the school, what's going through their mind. So once we get the kids in the school, that's where they're learning. That's where our teachers are the best. You know, and it's just trying to get them to school and whatever have things gone on either the night before, or how much sleep they've had, or even had breakfast. Is simply and those things have changed over time, I believe. So it's just, things have changed. You can, you know, we can talk, curriculum. We can talk about a lot of different things, and you know, and it's just simply our kids learn best when they feel comfortable. Kids learn best when they know they're there and they can just learn and not worry about outside factors. And I think that's huge.
And as you mentioned, is like if they're not hungry, if they didn't come to school rattled from a really emotional, negative environment. If their spirit is settled, if I could say that, they've had some food in them and they haven't been at risk between home and getting to their classroom, that's half the battle for a classroom teacher. If that list of things is good, man, that just makes the potential so much more.
That's true.
You know, I think that's one of the things I love about education and I love about learning and working with learners is that, yes, we might be their science, their math, their choir teacher, but there's so much more that happens there.
Exactly.
And sometimes, you're talking about mental health, sometimes as teachers, administrators, we maybe just see a cue from a student to say, hey, Tom, how you doing, buddy? You know, and you check in because you just have a sense in your spirit that little boy's troubled about something because I see them every day in my class. Something's off today. And those are great opportunities to hopefully impact that student. And then they're the learner who comes back 10, 20 years later and says, I don't know if you remember me, but you were my principal when I was in 5th grade. And then you get to hear where they are and hopefully, you know.
So the education world nowadays, it's a tough task just to balance. I mean, again, we talked a little bit about schooling, but balancing their life. I mean, I'm just talking from an educator standpoint and not kids at this time. It's just, there's a lot of things going on in your life. You come to school, you lead, you teach, and then you go home. And then obviously there's a lot more things with kids and everything. If you don't take care of yourself as an educator, that's not going to help you or anybody else. That's trying to find that balance. I struggle with that. I really do struggle with balance. I figure out, I try to work out here and there, but not nearly as much as I probably should. I try to read as much as I can. But that's relaxing to me when I read. And I don't do that enough to be able to do that. So I think you got to find a balance in education and yourselves to find out what works, because if you can't find that balance, you may struggle. Maybe not now, but maybe somewhere down the line.
Yeah, just yesterday I was speaking to a group at an organization, and what they had asked me to talk about was personal leadership. And we were looking at those components of what's the holistic reality of who you are as a team member, as a leader. So we're talking about spiritual, physical, cognitive, emotional, social, which that's no stranger to you. But we can sometimes get so focused in on one component that maybe we're not taking care of our emotional health, or maybe we're not taking care of our physical health, or any of those.
Sure, absolutely.
And when those are out of balance, it shows even when we don't realize it.
And it's tough to get it back.
It is. It is. Like you use, it's like, hey, man, I want to be around for a long time for that little grandson of mine.
Absolutely.
Who's 11 months old right now. And so we were talking yesterday in that event about, your why and the things that inspire you. And I'm like, hey, one of the reasons I want to stay healthy is I want to stick around and see that little guy graduate from high school and maybe even get married someday and have his own family, and he's 11 months old. And I'm already thinking about where do I want to be in 20 years? I hope it's here, serving, loving, and bringing value still, but we don't know. Right.
And a lot of people should reflect on what is their why, because I know it's probably very different. But really, it's the same. I mean, your why in this particular situation, I'm going to do the same thing with my girls.
Oh, absolutely.
And their grandkids. Yeah. And what's my why getting up and coming to work every day? What is my why going and doing this or doing that? So I think a lot of the reflection that we don't do enough. And once that reflection comes out, or obviously have more in-depth conversation with yourself. You'll understand what it is. Right. And you may not show that or do that on a consistent basis, but maybe that's something we all need to do regularly. Yeah.
And over recent years, I've become much more of a journaler. And for me, that's part of that is I take that time most days to just kind of free associate what's on my mind. And it may be gratitude. It may be, what does this day hold? Or how I want this day to go? Or how did yesterday go? And I want to do better in this area of my life. And just that time that cognition, that thought about how did I do today? Right? Usually we can find room for improvement, but at the same time, I hit those days and think, I want to be a positive impact on everybody who I cross paths with today. Whether it's a scheduled thing like us talking, whether it's I go grab a coffee and I see someone who I've not talked to in a while and we reconnect and have a chance to share each other's value with the other. I love those times, and education just really gives us that opportunity day after day.
No, absolutely. Totally agree.
Yeah. So one of the questions that I always enjoy asking, and I think I've even asked you this before in other venues, is looking back to when you were in your 20s, say you're coming out Olivet, you're thinking, I think I might want to coach, I want to be a teacher. What advice would you give to 20-something Scott now that you have a few more laps around the track and a lot of experience with what you've done?
I think the biggest thing is that whatever I say or whatever I want to continue on having that conversation, you must follow through with that. I think the biggest thing in that it goes back in the trust factor, and it goes back to whatever organization you're with, whether it's coaching or teaching, follow up. I mean, if you say something, do it.
Yeah.
If
deliver.
you don't do that, then people don't have that trust, and that's where it is. I see a lot of that going on. That, hey, okay, I'll meet you there. I'll call you. Da,
Sure.
da, da. And all of a sudden, get nothing.
Yeah.
And I think if I had to instill a person in my 20s, I think that's the biggest thing to be able to do. I think another thing is simply, we talked about the relationships. I mean, a lot of times when you're in your 20s and the last thing you want to do is have a conversation with someone, it's like, I don't want,
I'm busy.
Yeah, I'm busy. I don't want to. But if you had to take the time back then, it's going to be easier process back then. And you see people, I have conversations with kids. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I got to pry everything out of them. If they may have a different mindset. So I think that I would do that, just building better relationships through communication, and following through. And just, I lead from the heart. And I think that if I had to say something back then, whatever, it's a teacher, a young teacher coming out of college, lead from the heart and show people that you care, and they'll follow. People will follow.
Right.
And if you learn that over a period of time, that's fantastic. But if you don't learn it until you're age 40, you've missed that opportunity to build those relationships.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
But I think, there's so many things, but I think there's, another thing is find something you love to do.
Right.
I mean, if you're forced into something or you're forced into a job or a profession that you're not wanting to be there, then
please don't stay there.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I think
if
I grew up in high school again, I mean, we talked about the fine arts. I would love to be able to either play the piano or sing or do something, and my mindset back then was simply sports.
Play ball.
Exactly right. And I didn't have the vision or to say, hey, it didn't really think it was like, okay, well, it's not cool to be able to do that, but it's just simply, it wasn't in my. And if I had to go back, I would love to be able to do that. I would have.
Yeah. The creative expression, I think, is something we all probably ought to explore at some point in our lives and figure out what that looks like.
Sure.
And that it can be unique and different to each of us.
No question. Absolutely.
Well, man, those are some good nuggets for us to end on.
Yeah.
Thanks again for being here with us.
Again, it's a pleasure talking to you, and thanks for having me. And I'm here anytime you need me.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us on Leadership Level Up Podcast. You can find us on all the platforms that bring your podcast to you. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Leadership Level Up. Please subscribe so you don't miss future conversations with great leaders.